Welcome back to another edition of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum podcast. French saddlemaker Jean Luc Parisot recently traveled here to share with the students the fine art of traditional French saddle making. Join us now as Don Reeves discusses saddle making with Jean Luc.
Welcome back. I've been looking forward to this next podcast here at the National Cowboy Western Heritage Museum. Today we've got a wonderful guest that has come here to Oklahoma City, the museum, all the way from Saumur, France. Today we have Jean Luc Parisot from the École Nationale d'Équitation. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. It's really special for all of us that you've come all the way from France to teach a class of people from all over the United States hand sewing in leather, special techniques that are old world techniques. How did that come about?
I started as a civilian saddle maker at the age of 16. I completed an apprenticeship and got my diploma to be a saddle maker. Then I started working at the Army base for the cavalry school and have been with them for about 30 years. I am happy to be there.
Teaching our students, our saddle makers here in the United States, the old technique of fine hand stitching, how will that improve their saddle making technique?
The American saddle makers are exceptional at controlling the carving in this kind of leather work. If they can combine the finesse of the English saddle making techniques, they'll be the very best.
Fall is getting to be probably my favorite time of year at the National Cowboy Museum now, because every fall the members of the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association come to town. Saddle makers, bit and spur makers, rawhide braiders and silversmiths. And I realized they are the ones who asked you to come over here from France to teach the leather sewing techniques. Two of the members from the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association, Pedro Pedrini and Carrie Schwartz, came over to see you in spring of 2009 to learn from you and to have a workshop. Did that start this relationship?
I have known Pedro Pedrini for a few years, and it made me extremely proud to host two American saddle makers at my home.
This is a great opportunity for the American saddle makers that are here this week to learn from you, because the apprenticeship in the United States, the formal apprenticeships with master saddle makers, just doesn't happen anymore. So they didn't have the advantage that you had in France.
Sadly, we don't have a regular saddlery school with formal apprenticeship in France anymore either. But there is, with the Academy of French Equitation, a plan to create a school of that style of French saddle making.
In the early 20th century in the United States here, the advent of the machines that did the machine sewing on leather made leatherwork very cost effective. What's the advantage of hand sewing over a machine sewing leather?
Of course, we could sew almost everything with a sewing machine, but the important thing about hand sewing is to transmit certain knowledge. If we completely quit hand stitching, 50 years from now, nobody is going to be able to do much. Besides that, the finesse and the look of hand stitching is much, much greater. Not only that, the second aspect of hand stitching is it allows for much greater function, especially in the application of hardware and things like that.
Yeah. One advantage these students had is you brought over many of the special tools from France that you use over there that they've had the opportunity to learn how to use. What did you bring over from France?
I brought from France art blades, or awls, for special hand stitching, much smaller in size and a little bit different than what are used in the United States. I also brought some linen thread, corresponding to the delicate work we need to achieve. Then, the stitch marker, with different size wheels, gives us the opportunity to trace the size, and layout of the stitching we wish to create. We also have the opportunity to use some sewing ponies from the French style and a Swiss style of equipment, so the students get the opportunity to see different options.
For our audience, though, what is this? What is a sewing pony that holds your leather? Is that one there?
The sewing pony is a tool, a little bit like a vise, to hold the leather while you're stitching it by hand.
Isn't there a special finishing technique that you're going to be teaching in the class that these students may never have seen before?
I'm going to show them some old traditional techniques we still use in France. The goal is not to make them adopt new techniques, but offer them different options. And if there is something they can use, all the better.
Today in France, is there an interest in American Western style riding and our type of saddles?
Of course, there is a lot of interest in the Western style of riding in France. It is growing all the time. There are also a couple of magazines that cover just this style of equitation.
This has been a wonderful opportunity for this cultural exchange between France and the United States. The two craftsmen, a saddle maker from France, working with all these saddle makers in the United States. I understand that we have the Traditional Cowboy Arts Association here in the United States. Are there organizations that are starting now in Europe?
Yes, a craftsman association was just organized in France, which was modeled after the TCA. We wish that the French organization will get bigger and bring a lot of opportunity for exchange between France and the United States.
Je pense que ça peut être que bénéfique pour tout le monde. La suite nous dira si...
French-born California resident Pedro Pedrini assisted Jean Luc throughout the class. Pedro explained why it was so important for Jean Luc to make this visit.
The importance is based on what we can find today. When we go to a museum or see some old equipment, the fancy stuff, the very fine saddle making of the old days, Visalia, Loomis, etc., was all made by saddlers, saddle makers coming from the old country, from Germany, France, England, name it. That's where the very fine, the big history of the saddle making was created. Since then, all the saddle makers improved lots of things, mainly in the tree making, the techniques, the material, the carving, and everything. But we don't have any of those old people alive. Where can we learn? The older guys, they all still make a living. They don't have that much time to give you. So we can visit so much, and that's it. To find some of those old traditional tools and techniques, there's only one way, is to go back to the source, go back to get them in the old country. The opportunity created last year when Kerry and I went to see him, and he was totally receptive to that and was totally willing to share all that stuff. That's when the idea to bring him over for a class like we've got this weekend is so important. Because we cannot get this kind of knowledge from anybody else alive in the United States.
This has really been kind of a historic occasion with Jean Luc here from France, a saddle maker from France coming over to work with saddle makers from the United States. And I hope you'll tune in again here at the National Cowboy Western Heritage Museum for another exciting visitor to the museum. Until then.
This podcast is a companion to our quarterly publication, Persimmon Hill Magazine. It's a great resource for keeping you in touch with our great Western heritage and is available by subscription. Visit nationalcowboymuseum.org for details. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.